So what are you showing us?
I'm showing you my pigment.
Those are your pigments?
Treasure chest, exactly, yes.
Oh my
And
God.
their natural form.
That's a beautiful treasure chest.
This is the thing about Indian painting. There is a, right in it is this the whole conception of abstraction.
Is this good? Is it recording? Yeah? Red light's on? Sound is on? Okay, here we go. I get my little introduction.
Okay.
Then we'll start to talk. Hello, this is Wazo X Wazwo, Evil O. Once again, I'm coming from Delhi. I'm coming from this marvelous farm. And I'm sitting with one Olivia Fraser. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Very, very good.
Yeah, very good.
Olivia is a fabulous artist. We all know that. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about your art today, okay?
Okay.
She's very soft-spoken. I hope she's picked up on the microphone.
Okay.
So, Olivia, tell us a little bit about your history coming to miniature painting.
Mm-hmm.
You studied in Jaipur, I believe?
Yeah.
A little, and you want to just tell a little bit of your story?
Okay, so I first came to India in 1989 with Willie, who you've just interviewed.
Yeah.
And at that stage, I'd come fresh from art school. In fact, I'd ditched art school, come out to India to see what I could, to see whether I could make it.
Wait, I want to interrupt you. Why did you ditch art school?
For him.
Oh, I thought it was for some high aesthetic reason of some sort. It was just for William.
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't he lucky?
Okay. Well, still.
Anyway, so I came out and didn't know anything about India at all, but went to the National Museum here and saw the miniature paintings, and I just was bowled over, absolutely bowled over by the size, by the colours, by the, the gold, the semi-precious stones burnished, making this kind of gorgeous, light, sort of almost luminous paintings that I saw there. And I'd always gravitated towards sort of the minute and the tiny anyway beforehand. And so I started off doing my own versions of miniature paintings from everyday scenes of people that I met in the street. We used to travel a lot, so I would take my sketchbook and we'd be travelling all over India.
And what medium were you using at that time?
So initially it was watercolour.
Just watercolours, okay.
Yeah, initially watercolour. And I came over with this book that Willie gifted me by this kinsman of mine in the early 19th century called James Bailey Fraser and William Fraser, and they were collectors of Indian art back in those days. And they had commissioned, in particular, some extraordinary paintings known as the Fraser album.
The Fraser
today,
album, of
yeah,
course.
which you've used in your work. And
they were company school paintings.
They were company school paintings.
Right.
And that, again, I sort of felt that could be, in a way, looking at these images, they could be a form of teacher, because I came out of art school, and had nobody to kind of throw ideas against. In a way, the book was my kind of...
well, didn't you have a familial connection to...
So the book was the familial connection,
it was,
exactly.
okay,
yeah,
okay.
So, but not for 200 years, whatever.
Okay.
That was the connection. Because James Bailey and William Fraser were these distant kinsmen of mine.
Okay.
And so I used that as a starting point as well. I loved all those stark white backgrounds and sort of, the detail, and, you get up close to it and you see every single tiny hair and all that. And so that's where I started off, doing people just in the same way. And then about 10 years later, I found an extraordinary miniature painter in Jaipur.
Whose name
his name was Ajay Sharma.
Ajay Sharma, yes. Very well known now.
He's a lovely guy. And I was introduced through the Inoki lot, who were trying to sort of do a festival, a kind of crafts and arts festival. I think this was back in 2004 or 5 or something. And anyway, I started off learning with him, and he taught me about, you know, making your own pigments, and I couldn't believe that suddenly, you know, that was a kind of eye-opener to me, the connection between, you know, the landscape around his house, the trees. There was a tree outside his house. He said that the sap from that tree, I use that sap to, you know, I mix it with whatever, and that's what I use when I paint on top of gold. And then he would say, those hills over there, the Aravalli Hills, that's where the kariya, the white chalk, that's kind of the he uses it always as the base for all his colours, and it's the white colour that I use in the backgrounds. And
right.
anyway, that is over there in those hills, and then look at this tree, there's a nut, and that's a soap nut, and you know. And
it's amazing because almost all the colours in these miniature paintings were locally sourced.
Exactly.
Of course, some things were brought in, like lapis lazuli and things,
Yeah,
were brought in, but
that's why you get these gradations of colours in the miniature paintings as well, exactly, and that's what thrilled me. And to feel that connection. And then, of course, you know, he had handmade paper as well, and he taught us how to sort of bind paper and make it kind of slightly thicker or whatever you wanted to do with it. You know,
so he showed you how to make wasli.
How to make wasli, exactly.
How to make wasli. With atta.
Exactly. Well, sometimes it's atta, sometimes it's chickpea flour. There's all sorts of different variations. And he... you know, so there was all this whole process, and about even, you know, how to make the Arabic gum, you know, from the crystalline version, which I showed you there, and how to, you know, having come from the West, where everything's in plastic tubes,
right?
You know, it was lovely to see this kind of extraordinary sort of, you know, connection to the soil around you.
Was Ajay Sharma at that time, was he still grinding his own pigments? Did he have assistants to grind his pigments and everything?
He had, I think even then he had assistants, but I've seen him gravitate from, you know, working in his little bedroom and then to having another bedroom, and then now he's got his own studio, so he's kind of, you know, he's gradually...
People grow,
exactly, and he started off, you know, doing, like so many of those miniature painters, you know, just copying stuff from the past, and now he's doing his own extraordinary work, which he shows in Australia and places like that, and he teaches everywhere, and he's, you know, he's got a beautiful, you know, manner and way of making you feel that you're so lucky to be. And his wife is wonderful too. Yeah, his wife is a very nice person. That you sort of feel you're in this very special kind of club almost, sort of, you know, you're learning the secrets of it. It's just... Right. Well, you did learn the secrets and I did. And now we usually, COVID has changed things, but we usually co-teach something once a year, a kind of workshop in Jaipur once a year. At Diggy Palace generally, Diggy Palace, exactly, yeah. I met you there one year, I remember. Yeah. So. But I don't know what's going to happen now with COVID and goodness knows what. Right, everything's up in the air. Everything is up in the air. So how did you, you know, as you progress, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting your story, no. But how did you progress to now we know you as sort of doing these mandalas? Doing what I'm doing now. Floral, like geometric shapes. Circles. Well, I kind of, I also went to I remember going to this exhibition, which happened to be, I think, in the UK, or was it, that was from Jodhpur. It was Man Singh paintings, the Extraordinary Garden and the Cosmos ones. And that was about 2008. And yes, they'd been around for so much longer, but this was the first time, I think, that such a large, extraordinary collection from Jodhpur was being shown, all over. And I just couldn't kind of believe quite how contemporary they seemed. You know, these oceans, these sacred oceans, that were these just long, great panels of iterated colour patterns, and extraordinary sort of abstract. I mean, in a way, this is the thing about Indian painting. There is a, right in it is this the whole conception of abstraction has been there from right from the beginning. And this was particularly, I felt, evident in those Jodhpuri paintings, and I'm rather fascinated by abstraction. I absolutely adore op art and Bridget Riley's sort of op art, and I just felt that
And all of those things you can find in the old tantric miniatures and all that. I
absolutely.
mean, it's amazing. You go back, you look at it like, God, these people were way ahead of us.
Absolutely.
In some ways they were way.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
I think they were looking at it in a different way than we looked at it. It had a
Yeah.
different history and a different like concept behind it.
Absolutely.
We've got a friendly rooster behind us you might be hearing.
Yeah, we're on a farm. You might hear the goats. You might hear the goats soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so that's what attracted me to, and so I don't know. I suppose I brought in those ideas, that possibly a Western Eastern mix. I suppose it is a dance between the two. In a way, it reflects who I am. I'm not really. I go back to the UK, and I'm not totally really from there anymore. I've been here for so long, and I'm not really from here either. So there's a sort of mix that I am that I think is reflected in what I do.
So I want to talk a little more particular. You did some in the past that dealt with eyes, I remember. Do you have a story behind those at all you want to tell?
Well, I suppose that the initial story is that I do a lot of yoga, and
That was going to be a question, yes.
yeah,
Okay.
and I suppose the kind of really is the story behind that is that when I meditate, I would it's the eye that I see. That's what I see mostly. I mean, there's a lot of what I paint is to do with that, and I feel that in a way this whole mandala or kind of geometric patterning or whatever it is comes out of that, comes out of this whole sort of going inside and and meditating, I guess.
Okay.
And then having learnt about this miniature painting from Ajay, I also had this other guy called Desmond Lazaro, who's now very much in the contemporary art world. But
I was going to ask what happened to Desmond. He went somewhere. He's
Yeah,
not in India anymore, is he?
he's not in India. No, he's gone to Australia now.
Australia, okay.
Yeah, so he's moved a lot,
Okay.
and that's where he's ended up. And he was very kind to sort of say, my studio is your studio, when he was based in Delhi back in the early 2000s, and I used to go along and just sit at the back, and he had all these artists
No,
there.
he was also studying in Jaipur.
Yeah, he
around
studied
the
in
same
Baroda
time.
and then went to Jaipur under Banerjee's family. And
He was studying Pichvai. And,
that's right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I loved the vocabulary of that. I hadn't realised that that's what I loved, but when I'd seen, you flick through books back in the day, I was thinking, and I always was attracted to the Pichwai. And of course, you live in the Pichwai Centre in Udaipur.
Yes.
And that was what was so exciting. And when I went to Natadvara the first time, and you do darshan there, so the whole idea is darshan with all my eyes. It's about darshan. It's about sort of, and that's in a way also, so not only is it something about meditation, but it's also about, sort of giving witness to and exchanging a sort of vision, and that's in a way what art is all about anyway, isn't it? It's about an exchange of vision between the artist, between the artwork and the person, what do you call them, the spectator, the person who's looking at it.
Well, I often think of art as like a poem, you
Yeah.
know, and it's conveyance. You're conveying
Yeah.
something you can't necessarily convey perfectly in words, so you
Yeah.
have to convey it in a visual sense.
Yeah.
And hopefully somebody understands that language and hears it.
Yes.
We've got another jet
Another
going
jet.
overhead now. Well, such is life, this is evil, what you expect.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing, let's talk about, you did those two works with the feet, and then the one with
Yeah.
the hands you have hanging right here in your studio,
Yeah,
which is so
yeah.
wonderful. What's the story behind
So
those two?
then I was thinking about sort of in a way one's tools, for negotiating. I'm very interested in the spiritual side of art as well, and yoga seeps into that, and the Natadvara thing is very much based on bhakti, on a religious worship of Krishna, of bhakti worship, and I'm fascinated by all of that, and hands and feet and eyes, these are your physical tools for praying, for making, for doing darshan, for doing pilgrimage, for actually physically, that's what you as a person. I don't put people in, and I don't put myself in my artworks, but I do put my own hands and my own feet. And obviously eyes is different, but they are my handprints. Oh, hello. And so that was the reason why I was using those, in a way, to sort of bring in a I suppose is it a bit more of myself into it, possibly, into my work, show my own journey.
The feet were actually a progression to a higher consciousness.
That's right.
Remember, as you go up this pyramid.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not exactly sure what the hands represent.
And the hands they have the progression within them. So the hands are, there's an element of taking all sorts of ideas from hands. Hands, right from the ancient sort of, Neolithic caves where you see handprints on walls, or, the ones that are, and they're often red or they're white, to in India, where obviously handprints in certain areas, they mean sati, so that's about sort of, the women and about sacrifice. But then you also have hands that are, the hands are often coloured red for weddings, for dance, there's a whole lot of ideas that tie in with hands, and I wanted to give this idea of, in a way, awakening to following a path again. I'm always interested in this, trying to make a journey, whether it's with feet or with hands or with eyes or.
But now in your latest works, you've been turning, it seems to me, more to nature, if I'm right, like with the bee.
Yeah.
The bee paintings.
Yes, that's right.
And also I think you've done some with marigolds.
Not marigolds, no, but I've done bees and lotuses.
Lotuses,
so
yes.
Bees and lotuses, because the lotus, again, I've used endlessly as a sort of, in a way, an icon. And I pulled it apart and turned, twirled it around and repeated it and done all sorts of things with lotuses, and that's again connected and associated with chakras, the lotuses within, but also has this, the whole symbolism behind it of something that's almost like a perfection that rises out of this grey, muddy. Can rise out of the grey, muddy waters. So it's a sort of symbol of almost of hope, and particularly, and then bees. So that's something that I've used, and I've also used it in, in individual pictures in different ways. But
well, the bees make a wonderful humming sound that's almost like an om.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I first there's a yogic asana called Brahmari, where you have to make the sound of the bee and shut out all your other senses, and that I found so extraordinary that sort of encouraged me to. And also, I live on this beautiful place with blossom and all the rest of it.
You live in a really beautiful place, yes.
So bees galore,
right.
And as to inspire. But I also wanted something that was sort of active and passive. I like that whole idea of having supposedly this flower that, and then the bees kind of, and then there's all the connotations in poetry with Krishna and the gopis, and Krishna thought of as the flower or even as the bee. I mean, there's always a bit of crossover whichever way, but it's iterated over and over again in poetry about the bees sort of drunk with Krishna sort of flying from flower to flower, or the gopis, coming like a swarm of bees around. It's just used over and over again in beautiful
around
ways.
Krishna.
Yeah.
You've done some beautiful triptychs and things too. I should mention, they're just gorgeous.
Yeah. So I quite like architectural shapes. And that was another thing that when I started out here, I used to do a lot of. I painted watercolours of a lot of the buildings here, particularly some of the Mughal monuments that abound in Delhi. There's so many of them, and they've got these strong architectural shapes, which perhaps that's one of the reasons why I'm attracted to sort of repeating them, you know, in a sort of large way.
Repetitive way.
Repetitive
But
way.
they create like a trance.
That's
You
the
know,
other
I mean,
thing. And that's the other thing, it's a
And
sort of...
some you feel like you can almost fall into, you know. So I just want to talk about size a little bit, because when people hear the word miniature, you always think small painting,
Yeah.
and yet you do fairly large
Yeah.
paintings.
Yeah, they
want to
seem
talk
to have
about
got-
size a little
They
bit?
seem to have got larger, exactly.
Yeah, they've gotten larger.
Yeah, I started off very small, and I used to use the 1 rupee piece as my kind of, in a way, my sort of, whatever it is, my how to judge the size of things.
Of metric.
Metric.
Of metric,
Of
yeah.
metric, exactly. And then I've used my hands and my feet as well, and then things have sort of got a bit bigger, because if you then multiply hands and feet or whatever, you suddenly end up with quite a big space and a big painting. And then I found that some of the shapes suited it if they, you know, if they were on a large scale. I don't know. And I've got this wonderful paper maker in Hussein Papers in Sangana in Jaipur.
Yeah, we go to the same place, actually.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a good place.
Yeah, and they create the most fabulous paper. So,
They do.
So, you know, so that's possibly why. But who knows? Maybe I'm going to be, you know, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'll go small again.
Okay, is there anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I think
You don't
you've
think
covered
so?
it. I
You're a
think
little
that's-
shy at interviews, I think.
Yes, I
You're the
am.
opposite of your husband.
Totally.
Who kind of comes live in front of the camera and you go,
Yeah.
I'm being photographed.
Yeah.
But I love your artwork, Olivia.
you.
It's really beautiful and
Thank
it's very nice. And you're beautiful and your house is beautiful. And thank you for letting us come.
Thank
Okay.
you for coming.
Okay,
Thanks.
so this is Waswo X Waswo, Evil O, coming from New Delhi, somewhere on the outside of New Delhi, actually, with Olivia Fraser. Now you have to wave. Don't forget to like and subscribe, everybody. Like and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.